Good evening. This is Raven Dana. It is Wednesday, the 9th of November, 2022, and welcome to Walking Between the Worlds. This is class 1 of the series called Gifts Beyond the Fear. So for the next 4 weeks on Wednesdays, I'll be posting some information, and we're going to take a look at what is it that we can gain from exploring and understanding better different circumstances that would ordinarily be things that we might fear, or things that we might be concerned are coming from some dark place. I mean, sometimes, we grow up actually getting taught that things are scary, that, like dead people are scary. I mean, we all have ghost stories and we all watch some of that spooky stuff. But when you really think about it, dead people are just people without a body. It doesn't mean that you turn into an axe murderer when you die. It doesn't mean that you, right? It doesn't mean that you go ooh and scare people in the middle of the night when you're dead. You're a person that's for some reason sticking around. So we don't think about that much, but we grow up with that fear, and we're taught essentially from the time we're pretty small that whatever is not like us, and unfortunately that includes people, but whatever is different from us, or whatever we're unable to easily categorize or explain or understand, is something we ought to be afraid of. Now, some of that is just good sense, right? I mean, if you don't know what's in the river, you don't necessarily want to jump in there and swim around because there might be something in there that will bite you. But on the other hand, if we make ourselves afraid of everything that's different and unusual, we end up living a very small, very narrow, maybe a safe life, but still not going to be that safe, because in the end, something's going to get us anyway, right? So in this introductory class, I just want to talk a little bit about where the fears have originated and some of the experiences that we have that we might look to embrace a little bit more, and with a little more curiosity rather than fear, okay? I mean, look, here's the bottom line. We live in multiple realities. Not just this one that, we're sharing in the moment. Not only this one that we're consciously agreeing on, right? But very, very many other realities. Our consciousness extends into those. And there are doorways between the worlds, liminal spaces, states of mind, dreams, visions. And it's not a big leap to understand that there are things that we can't see and that we can't hear, at least not most of the time, that are right here in our space with us. Just in the same way we have very limited vision, considering the broad spectrum of light that exists. The entire rainbow of radiation available to the human eye, it only makes up a very, very small portion of the entire spectrum. Actually, it's about 0.0035%. Think about that. 0.0035%. This much of all of the known frequencies that we consider to be in the visible, in the spectrum of light, right? We only find visible this tiny little percentage, and yet we know the other wavelengths are perfectly real. We can monitor some of them. We know what others do. Even though we can't see them, we have found ways to detect many of them. So just because you can't see it, at least if you can't see it most of the time, it doesn't mean it's not real. Similarly, humans can detect sounds only in a frequency range from 20 hertz to about 20 kilohertz. And if you're, there are thousands of other frequencies. There's ultrasound and there's infrasound. Ultrasound, which is above, higher than, vibrating faster than what we can hear, and infrasound, which is low and slow, vibrating below the range of what we can normally hear. Elephants make sounds in the infrasound category that they can hear over long distances. We humans can sometimes feel the sound they make in our bodies as a hum or a resonance, but we typically can't hear that sound. And ultrasound, now you might be one of those people that if there's a light that's going bad, it drives you crazy because you can hear it. So your hearing then is tuned a little bit differently. So you're able to pick up those higher frequencies and they bother you, while somebody else might absolutely have no clue what you're talking about when you complain about what you're hearing, right? So I'm just making the point that it is a reality that there are those of us who are actually tuned to a little bit different frequencies. In other words, some of us can see things that other people can't see. Some of us can hear things that other people can't hear. And most of us can occasionally see and hear things and feel things that we normally can't, because something in our environment shifts or something in our bodies shifts, and that ability opens, right? We are, for a short time perhaps, operating in a way that we have an expanded energetic frequency view. So things happen. We talk about sacred sites and liminal places and, haunted houses, places with a lot of energy in them. And so I just want you to get the idea that all around us right now, in this moment, in this room in which I'm sitting, in the room in which you're sitting, there are things there with you that you can't see and that you can't hear, and that doesn't mean they're not there. So just take that in for a second. And obviously it doesn't mean that you need to be afraid, because we live with this all the time. So when there's a bleed through or something shifts for us and we have a perception that we normally can't have, I'm going to invite you to begin having a new thought about that. And that thought is curiosity, to be curious rather than afraid. So, we're taught to be afraid of everything that's different, anything unusual. We're taught to be afraid of things we don't understand. We're taught to be afraid of the dark and the things that hide in the dark. And again, with good reason, our ancestors needed to build a fire and sit somebody out by it and make sure that in the dark of night, they were able to keep predators away or hear something coming over the hill and, protect family and tribe and kin. We're not in that situation anymore. And even so, there are not many of us who would go walk on a dark street in a bad neighborhood in the middle of the night, right? I mean, it's just like, not the best plan. But that doesn't mean that darkness is bad or evil, or that we need to be afraid of darkness. So even sometimes, when we think about the things that frighten us, we tend to get more frightened at night. And some of these things tend to happen more at night. We might have a dream, or we might see something, or we might hear a sound. And it might happen more at night because, there's less going on. We have less distraction. There's actually less energetically going on because a lot of things, lights are off, people are asleep, there aren't as many cars, there isn't as much electronic noise in the environment. So, there are a lot of reasons, just basic practical reasons, why we might notice something more at night than during the day. So again, don't make the mistake of thinking it's because night somehow lets, the bad stuff out or the scary stuff out, because it's certainly not the case. So it's not surprising that we're schooled to be afraid of UFOs and UAPs and whatever you want to call them these days. It's not surprising that we're taught to think, if we see something in the sky, is it going to invade? Are they trying to take over the planet, right? There's lots of movies and TV shows and things that lead us down that path. But again, this is us. This is human beings remaking aliens in our own image, right? We are the ones who in our history have invaded each other's land and killed each other and conquered each other and enslaved each other. So there's some measure in which, there's some way in which we take our own history and we fashion out of it a story about potential aliens or non-earthly beings. I mean, whether they're, and I use the word aliens loosely. I don't mean that it's necessarily beings from another planet, although it could be. But I take the word alien to mean anything that's not human, right? Anything that's not intrinsically human. So there are plenty of beings that live between the worlds or in different parallel realities, or what we would consider to be, or what our ancestors would have called the fae, the fairies, gnomes and elves and such, life forms like that, elementals, spirits of different types. And it's not surprising that we have been trained up to be afraid of what we can't really understand. It's because, look, we're afraid of each other, right? We have divides in our own culture. We have divides in our world. If a culture is different, we tend to fear it, or we assume that that other culture is bad and wrong, or that they are behind the times, or that they are ignorant, because we don't understand, not because it's so. As now, in the modern era, we're finally actually looking at some of our history and discovering some of the things that we did and bringing them to the surface with new eyes. That a lot of the things that we've done based on our false idea that different people are somehow, open for conquering, it's not a good plan. And likewise, extending that thought to some beings that might be visiting our dimension or our reality, it doesn't make it so for them. It doesn't mean that that's how they're wired. It could be that they are, like E.T., botanists collecting life forms of plant life on a different world, right? Be curious. The thing is, if you're curious and they're going to eat you, they're going to eat you whether you're afraid or you're just curious, okay? So if you're afraid, though, you might miss an opportunity, a brilliant, marvelous, golden opportunity to have an experience and to bring something into your life and into the world that you will miss if you're trapped in your own fear. So I'm just going to leave that thought with you for now. Now, what if we were able to expand the frequencies that we take in and translate? I mean, our brain works kind of like a transducer, right? It takes in energy and it manipulates that energy into patterns that we can read and that we understand and that are similar to other patterns. So what if we were able to actually up the ante on that process, teach ourselves to open up our ability to reach different frequencies, to perceive different frequencies? And I do believe that we can. In fact, I think that as children, most of us have some kind of memory of experiencing things that we were then told it was just your imagination, or that's just a dream, or right, that kind of thing. Now, I'd invite you to think about that for a minute. I'd invite you to take a look at anything that occurred for you in childhood where you were sure that something was real, that you later became convinced wasn't, that you were later taught was quote unquote just your imagination. Because here the truth is that children are much more adept at seeing and hearing those outside the outlying frequencies. And it's not that we can't do it as an adult. It's that our brains, our minds have screened out that information. We filter it out because we're taught that it's not real, or it's not relevant, or it's scary because we can't understand it. And particularly when children can see and sense and interact with things that adults don't see, the adults, because they're authority and they're telling the child, you're not supposed to see this, the child's brain, our brain, will actually begin to filter out that information. So this is not unusual. This is the way it is. Filters are things that we all have, whether we're talking about filtering out our childhood friend that we had as an imaginary friend, that we were told is imaginary but wasn't, or whether we're filtering out compliments that people give us because we learned somewhere along the road, never trust somebody that gives you a compliment, or all compliments are ways or manipulations to get something from you. So we might actually have a filter that through which we don't hear or register compliments. We all have filters, and they are real, meaning that they actually filter reality as we know it. Our filters change what we are able to see, hear, and remember. And if you have any doubts about that, have a conversation with a police officer about witnesses, about people who witness, 3 or 4 people witness a crime, and how totally different their stories are. Why? Because their filters are adding and subtracting things from what they've seen and heard. And they're recreating what they've seen and heard through their filters without ever knowing that they've done it. So it's a thing, right? It's a thing. And again, I'm laying the groundwork to open you up to the possibility that you have more experiences than you are consciously aware of. You've just learned not to pay attention. You've learned to filter them out. So through this class, we will also be doing some exercises to help you to notice things in your environment that have always been there that you may not have paid attention to, where you may start to have more experiences or a deeper level of experience than you've had in the past. So I would encourage you this week to do some things, to maybe write down your dreams, to check in with your childhood self and see what's back there. See if you can get any clear memories or even foggy memories, but see if you can tap into what you were able to see and what you knew. We as children know things about realities that, again, we get talked out of as we grow up. So I want you to play with that idea. See if you can call back to yourself some of those experiences and some of that knowing that you have set aside as you grew up. So because we were taught to shut down our sensory experiences, it doesn't mean they've gone away. It just means we need to open them up again. So there are doorways between worlds. There are liminal spaces. And the first liminal space is that state of mind that we have that's between sleep and wake. It's also called the hypnagogic state. So it's right before you're falling asleep and right after you wake up, when you know you're not sleeping, but you're not fully awake, you're hovering in that between space. That is a prime liminal place in which to have intuitions, visions, visitations from the dead. It's a prime space because it's a connecting portal between the worlds. It's a place where your ordinary waking consciousness is interfacing with your dream consciousness or your deep, how can I say this? Where your ordinary waking consciousness is actually standing in the doorway of your deep unconscious mind, which is connected to everything in time and space, to all realities everywhere. So when you're standing in that doorway, then anything that's close by, close frequency-wise, anything that's resonating just a little outside your normal waking consciousness is going to be visible or audible to you. So pay attention a little bit more to that space as you're falling asleep and as you're waking up, and see what's in there for you. And again, children are curious. Children are very curious. They have much less fear than we do until we teach them to be afraid. As children, we dance between the worlds with much greater ease. We're relatively fearless for the most part, and then we learn to shift. So I'm going to hold up a picture for you. This is a picture that well, it's self-explanatory. The artist is Boris Groh, Groh. I'm not sure how you pronounce his last name. It's fantasy art, but I just want to show you this image. All right, so the thing that strikes me about this image is that the little girl and what you would call a monster are just making contact. Right? Look, she's reaching out with a flower, and it's reaching in. And look at that light shining from its eyes. Look at the way she's standing. She's clearly not afraid. I love this image. Right now, can you imagine if her parents walked out there and saw what she's seeing? Like, they would flip their shit, right? I mean, right? But no, she's simply there in the moment, having an experience with this being. And I love that image. I think that it's very, very much something that we need to pay attention to. That just because it's big or it's strange looking or it's something we as an adult might consider ugly, that doesn't make it evil, it doesn't make it bad, and we don't have to be afraid. If we trust our gut rather than our fearful mind, if we trust what we feel in our bodies rather than what we've been told to think, we can navigate that terrain with greater ease. I'm not saying that there's nothing out there that we should, I'm not saying don't be afraid of anything ever. I'm not saying that. Just like there are human beings that we want to watch out for, there are certainly some between world beings that probably aren't in our best interest to hang out with. But again, there are ways to protect yourself, which we will go over. There's also that level of intuitive knowing when something doesn't feel right, you get away from it. Right? Again, talking about the haunted house conversation. I don't know if you've ever walked in a house and just got the willies and just thought, I gotta get out of here. I don't even know why. Well, you want to trust that. You don't know what that is. You know that your body is registering something that's not right for you. Great, make your exit. Doesn't even have to be a graceful exit. But on the other side, just because you're hearing something or seeing something, if you're not getting that body sensation, like, oh, this is, there's something weird here. It's just like, oh, there's something happening. I hear something. Or I see, I just saw a shadow go by. Or, hey, did you see that little girl on the stairs? Right? We can see things and not let it stop us from the inquiry of what gift might this be bringing to my life? Where is the gift beyond the fear? And that's, again, of course, what this whole class is going to be about. The gifts beyond the fear. And, I think the first and probably the last, the most important gift beyond the fear is knowing that we are much more than we have been told. Knowing that we as human beings are much bigger, broader, deeper, more powerful beings than we've been taught that we are. That we matter in an enormous and universal way. We're not little specks, even though we are little specks on a little blue ball flying around the sun. We are so much more than that. And we have so much more capacity to play in these other places and dimensions and to know larger realities and to be able to bring back that energy, that wisdom, that healing, that magic to our lives and the lives of those around us. So, again, there may be some things to pay attention to, absolutely. And so I'm going to give you this one thought today. If you have fear and you want to bring it down a few notches, get in the habit of creating boundaries. Get in the habit of saying, for example, I don't know if any of you do this, but if you're driving in a car and you're feeling a little off that day, what I do when I'm feeling off is I say the word shield. And I imagine my car being surrounded by a bubble of light, right? By some kind of shield. I might even see images of a shield or an orb around the car. So that's one thing that you can do. And there's a saying that I'd like you to learn and keep with you always, because it's very, very useful when you want to create and maintain a boundary. And it goes like this: may our doors and gates and paths between the worlds be open, and may they be closed to any who would harm us or those we love. So it is. I'll say it again. May our doors and gates and paths, and our doors and gates and paths between the worlds be open, and may they be closed to any who would harm us or those we love. So three's the charm. Let's say it again. May our doors and gates and paths, and our doors and gates and paths between the worlds be open, and may they be closed to any who would harm us or those we love. So it is. Okay, you can feel free to play with that, to shift it a little bit so it's more comfortable for you to say in your own words, but keep that idea intact. The doors open for us in our lives, the doors are open between the worlds, and they are closed to any who would harm us or go through us to harm someone else. Okay, so I'm going to read you something, because playing in this area where things get strange and stranger, where there are dreams and visions and aliens and things appearing out of the mist, you know, we think that that's a place of sleep or a place of less conscious awareness, but it's not. That is a place of being more fully awake, more vibrantly alive. So I'm going to read you this short little poem. Don't go back to sleep. People are going back and forth across the threshold where the two worlds touch. The door is round and open. Don't go back to sleep. That's Rumi. So I'm going to read you a little paragraph written by my friend and teacher Robert Moss. These wonderful lines remind us that the easiest way to become lucid and conscious as a dreamer in the world is to spend more time in that twilight zone between wake and sleep. The learned name for images that come from this liminal state is the hypnagogic state. It's a state of relaxed attention in which it's possible to embark on grand adventures, to make visits and to receive visitations, and to forge creative connections that may be elusive to the everyday mind. So that's Robert Moss. And what I would encourage you to do is to play a little bit with the idea of waking yourself to your own larger friends and family in the between. If you have ever had connections with power animals or with guides and guardians, this would be a comfortable place for you to play this week before we get into some of the other areas. To just start that process of seeing what's there for you, seeing if you can maybe again recall from childhood, well, there used to be this bear that followed me around, or I used to have an invisible lion that always waited for me at the corner, or right, whatever it might be. So if there's an animal that speaks to you, or there's a being that you are familiar with, let yourself reconnect. Be in that space a little bit and see what happens and take some notes. And we will play a little bit more deeply next week when we come back to this conversation. Okay, thank you for spending this time with me today. I hope you enjoyed the first class. I'm also going to share a book with you, and I'll put up a link next class, but I just started reading this book. It's called Teaching the Living by Morgan Knudsen. Teaching the Living, it's quite good. And that's all I'm going to say about it. I'm just going to let you be curious about it. If you want to look her up, you can. If you want to look up the book, you can. We'll talk more about it in a later class. But for today, we're going to draw the class to a close and do a bit of a meditation. And I'm going to take you down deep into the space, a space in your where you will meet your child self, and see if there's anybody there that you want to reconnect with. So just get yourself comfortable with your back supported. Take a few breaths. If you're taking notes, put your stuff away. Get relaxed and close your eyes. And bring your attention to your breath. As you breathe, allow yourself to float on that sensation of breathing. Rising up on the inhale, drifting down on the exhale. Just floating. Rising up and drifting down. Your body lets go of tension. You relax. You feel yourself settling down on the surface beneath you. And as you relax, your mind becomes still. In that stillness, images rise around you. And you find yourself in a favorite childhood place. It might be indoors, might be in your bed, might be a favorite chair. It might be a place where you played under a table, might be outside in a park, under your favorite tree, or gazing out a window. Just see where you are. Let yourself be drawn into that place, wherever it is, a favorite place where you could play and imagine and be fully, comfortably yourself. Let yourself see, smell, hear whatever's surrounding you. Walk around and explore the space. And out loud ask the question, is there anyone here with me? And just wait for a moment. See if an animal or a being, see if something or someone appears with you. And if nothing happens, that's okay. And if an animal or being arrives, just greet them. Welcome them. It might be that you remember them completely, and it might be completely new to you. Just accept whatever your experience is. And you notice now that in this place there's something new, there's a doorway. And because you're curious, you walk through that doorway and you find yourself in an entirely different world. You notice how everything is in this new space. You notice the color of the sky. You notice the animals there. You notice all these different colors and shapes. You can hear animals. Even though you can't see them all, you know they're there. And you look up to see something gracefully flying overhead. And you walk forward, following a little path that takes you down by the water, by a lake. And it's a beautiful breezy day where you are. Just the perfect temperature, just the right breeze, and the air smells good. And you see a bench by the lake, so you have a seat. And you hear someone running, little feet, a child running, and you turn just in time to see your own self as a child running towards you. And they stop short and you look at each other. And your child self comes over and tugs on you to whisper in your ear and says, "Here's what I want you to remember." And then they tell you. And in that moment, you lean back and you smile at your child self, and they run off. And to your left, you see another door, an archway, and you feel pulled gently toward it. And so you stand and walk through, bringing with you the information you were given by your child self. And as you step through that doorway, you find yourself floating on your breath. You find yourself traveling on your breath back toward your body, back to the room in which you rest, back to the moment. You breathe your way back, filling yourself with your own awareness, bringing back the images and thoughts, bringing back what you've learned, bringing back the energy of the place. You come all the way back, refreshed and relaxed, and you allow your eyes to open. Well, thank you for being with me today. This is Raven Dana, walking between the worlds, and I'll see you next time. Good night.